The bad news is you were wrong. The good news is you're forcing me to give you a better explanation on false positives and false negatives. Here we go. Going back to the original PowerPoint with 1,000 applicants where 10 lie, 90% accuracy means you catch 9 liars. Likewise, 990 tell the truth, 90% of them, we have 891 truthful. This gives us our true positive, they lied and they caught them, and our true negatives, they told the truth, and it said they told the truth. They were not lying. Where it gets a little icky is these other two parts. So of my 10 liars, 10% are false results. So they lied, but it did not catch them. So the result is false, saying that they did not lie when they did. Likewise, of the 990 who are telling the truth, 10% of them, so 99, have been falsely accused. They have been falsely told that they lied. So if I put this in terms of COVID with the same numbers and example, if 10 people get a positive test saying, yes, you have COVID, then 90% of them, or 9, have COVID and are told they have COVID, as in you have a true positive. And for the 990 who did not have COVID, 90% of them, or 891, those are the true negatives. And that's the easy part. Where it gets a little tricky is when you consider the wrong answers. They get multiplied by 10. The numbers aren't so bad, but how do they fit in? If someone is part of the definitely have COVID, but the wrong result, then they would be falsely told that they do not. It's a false negative. So by default, the 99 have to be a false because it's the 10%, but they are part of the not COVID group, are given a wrong result, so they are false positive because it falsely accuses them of having COVID, but they don't. They're part of the 990 who don't. So now let's put it together with this mess. Using the real life scenario, let's break it down. Of my total population, 167,000 have COVID. If it correctly identifies them with a 90% accuracy rate, there would be 150,300 people. They have been correctly identified as having COVID. If you take the wrong version of that, 10% of 167,000 is 16,700. These people have been incorrectly identified, saying they don't have COVID, but remember, they're part of the COVID group, so it's a false negative. They've been told they don't, but they do. Moving over to the nope, we don't have COVID group, this is the remainder. Take 90% of them and 10% of them and identify them as the true negatives, as in they're told that they don't have it and they belong to that group, and the false, because they're part of the 0.1. Now they're supposed to be part of the we don't have COVID group, but they're told wrong answers. So the false part of not having COVID is, hey, you have COVID. Now let's take that and put it into our chart. The true negatives took 90% of 327,833,000. The true positives took 90% of 167,000. The false negatives, which is where it gets tricky, the false negatives have been told that they don't have COVID, but they actually do. So we would be taking 10% of those that did. They have been told they don't, but they do. The false positives took 10% of those who were not having COVID, but they were told they had it. And then you can proceed to answer the questions about the numbers and the probabilities. Your application for this week is very similar to what you see on the screen. This came directly, so feel free to check out PowerPoint 3E for an explanation. "95% of the 40 who use drugs is 38. The remaining 5% of the 40 is 2. This gives us our true positives, and since the 5% is the false, remember these last two people, they're part of the 40 who do drugs, but they were given a false result. So even though they do drugs, they didn't get caught. They're a false negative. 95% of our 960. This means 912 people were told they don't do drugs, and they don't, because they're part of the don't group. Lastly, 5% of the 960 gives us a total of 48 people. They were told an incorrect answer, hence the 5%, so they are false. They belong in the none, as in drug use, but it's a false answer. Hence, it's a false positive. So filling in our chart on the true positives, false positives, true negatives, false negatives, we have our 40 who actually do drugs, whether they got caught as a true positive or they got away with it, saying it was false, but it's a negative result at false, meaning negative, false is a positive. They do the drugs. And then we have our 960 who don't do drugs. The 912 who don't, and it truly tells them they don't, as well as the 48 who do drugs and don't get caught. It's the diagonals that have to add up to the proper amount for each concept.